On this week's episode, we are discussing oversharing.
At risk of oversharing, I guess we'll have to see what this episode is about.
So stick around.
Hi, and welcome to Rare with Flair.
The podcast where two best friends with the same rare disease are out here living our best lives. I'm your host, Casey.
And I'm your host, Cassandra. Okay, this episode is actually about oversharing, and especially as it relates to, like, disability, chronic illness, and, like, social situations. That's right. The episode premise, okay?
Yes, correct. And we're excited to overshare to all of you, I'm sure, which we often do.
That is part of why we have this podcast, is so we can overshare to strangers without having to do it in our regular lives.
Yes. Absolutely. It gets it out of our system.
It really does.
On the pod, and you know, we'll get into that. It gets it out of the system. Kaz, we're exactly in the middle of the year.
That's like just now. So nuts. Today is the 1st of July when we're recording this.
Yeah, we just did our vision board, I feel like.
Oh my
but we
gosh.
Didn't. So it's time to take a look.
We should do
everyone listening who did a vision board, it's time to take a look at it and see where you are.
Yeah, no,
see
seriously.
If you've messed it up.
I know.
If you're doing all right.
One place that I'm still lacking in, and it's flossing. That was on my vision board, and I've been doing a mediocre job. Ugh.
Well, now's the time, mid-year.
Gotta correct course.
Really, the next 6 months, you can correct yourself.
That's
you have
right.
Time. You have time. We always have time.
How have you been, Case? Hanging in the summer?
I've been good. I went on a weekend trip to Myrtle Beach
Yay!
With some college friends. And it was really nice. It was one of those things I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I was at the beach, and then I just exhaled, essentially. It was really great. The beach is a happy place for me. It's very relaxing to me, and it was a nice reset. And how have you been?
I have been okay. I've had, like, a couple of very, like, back-to-back weeks, and so it's like I'm actually about to go on vacation, like, in between when we're recording this and when this episode comes out, and I feel like I'm super needing it too, so yeah. I think it'll just
You're
be
gonna
super
get
nice.
A good reset. Mm-hmm.
I think so. It's a lot of outsidey stuff, like hiking and whatnot. It'll be great. I'm really excited for it. But
that's great.
Also, after this episode comes out, we will reunite. I'm so excited. We're both going to the National Organization for Albinism and Hypopigmentation's biennial conference, aka every other year, in Anaheim. So I'm so excited to see you, even though you're going to be crazy busy.
Yeah, it's I'm going to be, like, essentially working the conference instead of necessarily coming as an attendee, and you're also running sessions and stuff. So we'll be kind of cray-cray, but we'll definitely have some time to hang, and I'm just excited to see you, your face, and give you a hug.
Yes.
I can't wait.
It's going to be great. And we'll, in between all of the running around, we'll find 20 minutes to have a meal.
Yeah, we sure hope so. Absolutely.
But it'll be so great, and our next episode, hint, wink, wink, will be about that. So we will tell you all about it.
Yep, and we're nearing our 100th episode as well, and our 4-year mark. So all of that is exciting. That's all coming this summer as well.
Coming soon.
And coming soon to a podcast provider near you. I feel like we haven't done this in forever at the beginning, but just kind of plugging some things. We used to ask for reviews and ratings a lot, and, or just like, not ask for, but remind. And I think we did it recently at the very end of an episode, but nobody listens to the end, let's be real. So I'm like sticking it in at the beginning. If you like what you hear, it's just so helpful just to like click the star button. That's all you have to do. You don't even have to write a review. I think on Spotify you can't even do that anyway. Yeah. Just on Apple Podcasts. But we'd love a rating or a review. And also find us on the socials, Facebook and Instagram, rare.with.flair, and our website, rarewithflair.com. And you can also email us at hello@rarewithflair.com and ask us questions. And we love your emails, even though sometimes we don't always reply right away, but we always try to get back to you. We love
your emails, you guys. Like, they make us super excited.
And Insta messages.
Yeah, Insta DMs and emails are the places we check most often. That was a very thorough overview of all of the places you can find us.
I tried.
I also, just so you know, we release every other Tuesday, as you guys may know. If the episode is taking a while to hit your favorite app where you normally will listen, you can always go and listen online on our website, rarewithflair.com. We don't have any control over when it hits those apps, so sometimes it's even been like the next day. It's kind of nuts. I don't know why it's like that, but but you can always go and listen on our site, and I usually write some kind of a silly intro for the episodes, so you know, you can have that too. Occasionally really links will get in there too if we reference a product or something. So you can also check those notes depending the episode.
Yes, it is a fun time, and I feel like that was a good thing for us to just remind everyone of.
So good. Casey's keeping house over here. I'm so glad. But yeah, no, okay, so this topic for an episode just kind of popped into my brain recently. It's been on my mind this year. I don't even really know where to begin, but like, I think we've done some episodes on this before. So we did an episode I want to say last year, about advocacy online specifically, and how we talked about how like we tended to overshare on social media back when that was also more of the norm too. That's just how we used to use Facebook back then. But like also talking about just like oversharing in our lives. I feel like this comes up a lot, and I feel like I've been really guilty of this before, and it's not always a bad thing, but it does sometimes make the environment weird.
Yeah. And Cass thought of this episode idea, and you thought of our last episode idea, so you're just like the idea queen lately.
That's
You're
crazy.
rolling with ideas.
That's just funny because I feel like Casey thinks of like most of them.
I went through a time where I was, and now we've switched. I think
that's fair. Honestly, this is a very collaborative effort show. Truly,
it's true. It's very collaborative. Yeah, no, this is a great topic, and it was something like organically that we were just talking about together in our everyday life, and then we were like, "Hey, why don't we talk about this on the pod?" Which is often how these episodes come up. Is like we're just talking about it, and then we're like, "Oh." We could talk about this while we press record, and it's going to be the same thing, essentially.
Pretty much.
And there's a lot to say about it. I feel like when it comes to oversharing, you change as you age. Like, Cass and I have had a rare disease our entire lives. You're born into this world with it. You don't know socially, you know, you're learning social cues and how to, like, navigate relationships, and you don't always know how to share. And I think there are different reasons people overshare. Maybe you would like attention, and you want...
and that's not always a negative thing. I want to interject, because, like, I think wanting attention, people are like, oh... That's so selfish and self-centered. But also you want, like, you might just want validation.
Yes.
That's another form of attention.
Yes, absolutely. Or you might just want to be, like, trying to connect, like, trying to make a new friend and being vulnerable. You might feel like, oh, this is a way for us to connect. Like, I'm going to share with them this deep thing. There are different reasons why. Yeah. And then there's sharing, and then there's oversharing. It's like, where does it become oversharing? Like, where's the line?
I think another reason you might overshare is, like, you haven't fully gotten over the situation, or if it was, like, a particular moment in time or an experience, you're honestly still kind of working it out. And with or without therapy, this is something that can still happen. I think having a dedicated, for me personally, having a dedicated spot to actually just, like, have therapy and have that be, like, the place where I overshare has helped me minimize that a lot over my life. But, like, before I was in therapy, I would overshare a lot in a lot of different kinds of social situations because I felt like I was being heard, and in my mind, I felt like I was being seen.
Yes. I agree. I feel like our disability is such an integral part of us that if I don't share about it a lot, how are they ever going to really know me? How are they ever going to really know my experience?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Both like the visible and invisible parts, I think, because, and I think it also will change as you go through experiences with your life and your health. So, you know, to level set, again, we have this rare disease, Hermansky-Pudlak syndrome. We talked about it on our last episode too. There's a vision component, there's a bleeding disorder component. We both also have like chronic health issues. I have had intestinal disease and got my colon removed back in 2015. So like it's been a long time, and I think also fresh out of my like a really like traumatic period of my life that led to getting my colon removed, I would bring that up a lot in conversation, which sounds kind of weird, but it wasn't always irrelevant. Like,
yeah,
I think when you want to share something, you'll kind of find any moment that feels adjacent to like slide that in, because I felt like this was a huge life-altering time for me that, like what you were just saying earlier, I feel like by knowing this about me, you know about me.
Yes. Yes. I think I'm so into advocacy that can turn into oversharing. And I think, I mean, I don't want to get too much into like the social media of it all, because we do have a whole episode on that. And I think that's a great episode, actually. I recommend it. Really, not to toot our own horn. I'm really happy with that episode. I recommend it. And I think, oh gosh, I wish I could remember what it's called. Something about Facebook or something.
I think it was like oversharing online or something like that.
Online. Like, yeah. So I don't want to get too much into that territory, but as someone who grew up really wanting to share my story, I might have bombarded my newsfeed with advocacy stuff too, which is a whole other thing. And yes, we are doing this podcast now, but for us, this podcast almost feels like a hidden hobby.
Right.
Like we share it. We talk. We're not ashamed of it, but it's a way for us to advocate online without having to like blow up our own personal news feeds with the stuff. Like we have a designated place to put it, and this is where it goes.
This
and
is for the people that it's for.
Yes, it's not going to bleed into everywhere else in our lives. It can kind of sit here, and if we have to say something, we're going to put it here.
Yeah.
So what you were saying about your colon, obviously you got that removed as a teen. I feel, for me personally, like as a teenager is when this hit its peak. Like I feel like as a kid, like if there's a graph, it's like as a kid I didn't overshare as much. As a teen, it was like way too much, and then it like went back down in my late 20s, early 30s.
Yes.
Which is what I am now. So yeah, you would say, I think for me, like for sure. I did want attention, and I think it was what you were saying earlier, though. I didn't feel seen. I had felt so misunderstood like my whole life.
Yeah.
That I just wanted people to understand, and it may have felt a little like over the top or performative to some people, because I think a lot of people think, oh, they get through the world so easy. They're not blind. Like they get along just fine. Or like they're not sick. They look so healthy. So then when I would like post about this stuff, it probably looked like I was being dramatic, even though I was sharing my real experience. Because there are some people who might be over dramatic about their diagnoses, and they, you know, like
sure.
I'm not saying that doesn't exist, and I'm not saying I haven't been that person either, but at the same time, I think people think we're overdoing it, and then it just gets murky because you want to be understood. That's like the main thing.
It's hard because I think that's such a good point, and that makes me think of, this happens to, I feel like, pretty much anyone in a minority group, where you feel like the representative of your group.
Yeah.
So you feel obligated to give a defense. hey, I'm a person like you. And you want them to understand that there's a lot of struggle, even though you might seem fine on the surface.
Yes.
But also that you, especially with disability, like, hey, guess what? I lead a semi-normal life, believe it or not. And
yes,
because we've been pandered to a lot, we're also extra sensitive to it. And so we feel like, I feel obligated to give a defense of like, no, my life really isn't that bad. It has its moments, but I need you to understand that I'm a person and I have actual interests. And so then that can sometimes lead to oversharing.
Yes. I love what you said about, where's the line between sharing all the struggles we've been through and being like complainy or preachy or just annoying.
It's so hard to find that.
I kind of love it when I'm with a group of friends. This actually kind of happened recently on my trip. Something happened where like a waiter made a comment about how close I was holding my menu. And I kind of love when that happens because I don't have to share the story. My friends actively see like ableism in the wild. And I'm like, so it's not me going to Facebook, this man did this. It's just me living. I'm simply living. And my friends are seeing, oh, this is her day to day. She goes through ignorant people making comments at her. And they get to see it without me because I feel like it could look like we're exaggerating the situation if we're always telling these stories. But then we also want to be perceived as normal, like you said. So it's like, how do we share our struggle without like seeming like our life isn't normal as well?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. That's so true. And there are times where people don't have that luxury. That happens, like, I love when people see that when, like, I went to the mall with someone some years back and I had Romana, and the amount of people who stared, pointed, said something, asked me something, like, they were getting tired. And it's like, yeah, welcome to my life, but they also see that she's helping me. And so it's like, you gotta like find that balance, and it's really difficult. But not everyone that you encounter who maybe asks you a question gets to actually experience that with you. And so that's when it gets hard to, I think, accurately represent your experience without like just telling the entire story of your whole life.
Yes. I think back to, when we were growing up and younger, I think a mistake I made a lot in high school specifically. I had a lot of health stuff, a lot of different random things. And sometimes when someone would bring up like a health struggle they had, I would relate. And it got a little one-uppy. Like I was kind of like, I was doing that a lot, and I didn't realize that it was like a problem because I was young and you're learning socially. Like I really don't do that anymore, but I feel like that's where oversharing can get really not so fun for the people around you. Like we don't want to hear about your stuff all the time. Like we get it. Like you have a health problem. Like, right. And even when it's the same health problem, like someone's like, hey, I have this thing, I would often be like, me too. And sometimes that's appropriate. Maybe with a really close friend, you can kind of commiserate together. But yeah, not really just in regular conversation when someone is dropping their diagnosis. Do you need to always hop on and be like, I get it, or like, I know it, and I still, that's something I'm still learning, but I've gotten much better than I used to be. And I do know that it was probably annoying. Truthfully, I know there are lots of like, not just young people who do that because they don't feel fully understood. And, there's an extent that we will probably never be fully understood. That's just life. I feel like I had so many thoughts while you were sharing that though. Oh my gosh. One of them is though, so like, I read a Brené Brown book earlier this year, which was really great. Highly recommend Brené Brown if you've never read any of her books. I read The Gifts of Imperfection. And so she was talking, and she's done a lot of research on shame and empathy. And with empathy,
you're not playing Oppression Olympics. Like, you're not like, oh my gosh, my life is hard too, so I get it. You don't need to show and flash your credentials at the door, unless, I guess, maybe they're challenged. But, like, even then, it's like, no, I think mostly what people want is to be, like, if they're complaining about something or if they're talking about it, they just want to be heard too, frankly.
Yes, right.
And so, like, what you should do is hear them and say, like, wow, that's hard, that's difficult, that sucks. And you can just stop there. Like, you can just support them and listen and be there for them without, like, making it about you. Because I've super done that. Anytime anything adjacently related to, like, you know, intestinal problems or, like, you know, people talking about their tummy aches. And I'm like, oh, yeah, me too. I have bowel disease. And then, like, I suddenly made it about me. And now I made it weird.
Right. And, well, because it's also kind of annoying, and we've talked about this too, if someone is just talking about their, like, basic everyday tummy ache, and you have been through what you've been through, then it's so, like, you so want to just be like, well, I've really been through that, though. You know what I mean? Like, you have no idea, like, what it's like, but, like, that's also just not the time.
And that's also super invalidating to people. Like, they've never been through what you've been through. Like, doesn't mean anything to them, and now they just feel awkward.
Now they just feel like you're trying to, like, one up, when really it can be frustrating on the other side to you, though, of, like, oh, they don't know, like, they don't know
they're
real
complaining
pain.
about nothing.
They're complaining about something so little. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Another book that I want to reference when talking about oversharing too is, so Case and I both read this recently and highly recommend this book.
Fantastic
incredible read. 5-star read. It's called Platonic. It's got a longer title. I think it's like The Science of Making and Keeping Friends, by Dr. Marissa Franco. It's just absolutely phenomenal. The second chapter, she talks about vulnerability, and she distinguishes, and she does a much better job than I'm about to right now, like, vulnerability and oversharing. And to kind of, like, paraphrase it, it's basically like, it's oversharing when it feels like a defense response. You know how you feel when you're sharing this information. When I overshare, it feels like word vomit to me. Mm-hmm. I compulsively, I feel weird somehow in the situation, or I feel like just a strange desire to get close to people, not like a natural, normal desire to get close to people, but, like, to also kind of force closeness by sharing something deep. Mm-hmm. And, like, I'll just, like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is my life, and then it just kind of all, like, comes tumbling out, and you can't really, like, do much to stop it. And I think, like, she brings up some really great points of, like, when you want to be vulnerable, like, you really have to consider the timing, the closeness with the person. There's a little bit more thought involved than just, like, kind of an impulse share, which I feel like is usually what oversharing kind of is. It's like an impulse.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And in the book, she kind of explains there's a very, very good balance, because you can't, you want to be vulnerable enough. If you're not vulnerable at all, you know, people are not going to like you either, because they'll never feel close to you. Mm-hmm. If you're too vulnerable too fast, it feels weird. You've got to share just enough, like, on a slow basis as you're getting to know someone, and it's hard to find that balance. Like, it kind of can come naturally, though. I think like, if you don't force it, it can kind of just happen. Sure. I feel like, because of the work I do, and I feel like if people wanted to stalk me enough, they could find out about my rare disease and stuff, because, like, you know, and however, there's a difference between somebody, like, internet stalking you and finding it out, than you sitting down with them and, like, telling them all the details. I feel like that's a very different thing.
Very. One is solicited. Like, they went and found that information about you. Right.
Like, even, I'm going to bring up Molly Burke, so grab your shot glass, everybody. I'm using her as like a disabled example. I could really interchange her right now with any disabled content creator.
Sure.
But like technically Cass and I are creating content online, right? So like let's say I go to Molly Berg's channel and I binge watch her and I learn a lot about her disability and her feelings. I feel like that's, if I got to know her as a person, it would be a little weird on our first day meeting for her to just like spew all that out at me, you know, because we'd be getting to know each other, and that's with anybody. And so, you know, I don't think it's wrong to share online in the right context, and that's what we're doing, and we hope it helps people, and you know that we can connect and with people. But at the same time, like when we're trying to just make friends out in the wild, they don't need to know all of that, and if they figure it out another way, that's one thing, but we don't need to like just wear our heart on our sleeve at any moment and just insert our like traumatic medical pasts onto someone immediately, you know.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Yes, so there are like a couple, so I was, you know, this is more of like a conversational episode. It's like not super structured. But I did kind of, so I wanted to talk about dating because we did long ago an episode about dating. It's long been a ago. Very really long time. We're both still single, but like as of the recording of this episode, we are
the way it was said a long time ago,
and we're still single. We've had you know, it's not like we're not out there.
We've had many people come in and out of our lives in between that, then and now. Let's just say that.
At this current point, we're single. And so, like, I think my philosophy on dating and the rate at which I decide to disclose information has shifted pretty dramatically. I don't know I don't even fully remember like what I said in that episode, but I've thought differently about the ways that I disclose while dating. Because when I did start dating, I was pretty fresh. I was, again, still fresh out of these experiences. I really started dating in college. And it was after, like, my whole traumatic medical past. And my thought process at the time was I want to disclose early so it doesn't feel like I'm hiding something or like I'm blindsiding someone later on if they find out this about me later and it feels like I kept it as a secret.
And can I cut in too?
Absolutely.
I feel like I used to want to disclose early with dating too, because if they want to reject me for this, I better lay it out now so I don't get my heart involved and then get. Anyway, that's for me, but
and that's honestly it's another component
to do it early.
I don't do that now. Not only because I'm older, but also because, you know, especially like, it doesn't actually, frankly, it doesn't matter how you know the person. Both dating online and like either being set up or unless it's like a longtime friend that knows a lot about you already, it's just not pertinent information. I think the first thing that comes up is my vision, and I'll address it in a way, but I'm not gonna necessarily monologue about it until directly asked.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I want to address it very carefully and like quickly in a way of like, hey, it's like not an elephant in the room. You can ask, like kind of opening the door for people to ask any questions if they have them, because if you don't talk about it, people think that you're uncomfortable with it and they don't want to bring it up if they think you're uncomfortable with it.
Right.
So for like because like especially since like Casey and I are like users of mobility tools, I have either a cane or a guide dog and Casey has a cane. we kind of have to bring it up, especially like logistically if you're finding someone at a restaurant.
Yeah, or like you're going to be calling a ride share.
You're going to be reading a menu.
Right.
These things will show themselves very quickly. And so, making an offhand comment about it, making maybe a joke about it, people feel more at ease to talk. Chronic health, though.
Other story.
I just don't share that.
No.
I just don't share that until...
No, me neither.
Until, frankly, I'm ready to date, like be in a relationship with someone. And even then, I think now at this point, and now that I'm in, my late 20s and I've been in some relationships and been on a bunch of dates, like, I would probably still wait and share very... like surface level details.
Yes. Yes, agreed. I remember the first time I disclosed my vision to someone on the apps many, many years ago. And I remember writing like a really long paragraph, which is like obnoxious when I think back. No shade.
No, and it made sense to you at the time. So like, I don't blame you.
It was what we were saying earlier. You kind of want to get it all out in the open so they can reject it if they want. And then, whatever. And now it is like a literal 3-word sentence, It's like, It's basically like, I'm visually impaired if you have any questions. Like, that's all it is now.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to explain that I can't drive yet. I don't need to explain any of that. If you want to ask about it, we can ask about it. I don't need to like explain, hey, my eyes are going to shake, or I don't need to go into any of that.
No.
You'll figure it out when you meet me. They'll figure it out. And the health, yeah, absolutely. I've never disclosed, not never, I said that wrong. When I'm like, if I've only been on a few dates with someone, I've definitely never disclosed the health stuff. And like, yeah, it would just have to come up naturally. And even when it did, it would be like little sprinkles here and there. I think like even the vision is like that. Like the vision, I disclose very early on, and I'll never stop doing that. I think that's important to just get it out of the way early. So I disclose the vision early on, but even then, I'm not going to share a lot unless they ask. And I might just say little things here and there, but like it's not. But however, I feel like when I like start dating someone, like you're actually like in a relationship with someone, at some point in there, you do want to be like really known by the person.
Yeah.
And at some point, you do need to bring it up quite a bit so that they actually can understand your life experience. But
and that's how they could really like love you, because they know you. But like my preferred way, like on the apps or something like that, of disclosing my vision is usually like if I do look for an opening, but for something extremely brief. I think like when we were in a position where I have like 5 thoughts, but like when we were in a position that we were oversharing more in our lives, we would take any adjacent topic as an opening.
Yeah, right.
To talk about a lot of stuff, right? And so, I mean, and speaking for myself, really, but like...
No, same.
I think, like, I want to do it early when you're, like, kind of messaging back and forth, especially on the apps, just so that they are aware if I show up on this date with a cane, it's not, like, crazy shocking to them, if you're talking about, like, what part of town do you live in or something like that, I'll mention and how, like, why I decided to live in this part of town because it's walkable, and then, and I'll mention, I don't drive, I'm visually impaired, and then continue the conversation and not end it there, just so that they, like, if they want to ignore it, I guess, like, they can, right? Like,
right.
But I can't say I never told them.
Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I was going to say something and my mind just went kapooey.
I think another thing, if you think of it, let me know. I think another thing is, like, I think, speaking for myself, I think when we were thinking that we wanted, especially in a dating context, to, like, share pretty much anything about us early and often, or like early and honestly, to me, thinking about myself, that 100% came from a place of insecurity. I thought I was being mature and forthcoming, but like I was nervous that they would reject me for those reasons. And that's why I wanted to give them the out. Yes. And you know what? No, because I think everyone has something to disclose. Every person has something that they don't really want you to know about. And not that they're hiding things, but that's just something that is vulnerable for them, okay? Like, everyone has something, whether it's about their family or their job or their finances. And some people literally never share these informations until they're, like, married and deep into relationship.
I mean, and that gets into the point where, like, they do, as your partner, if you really are entering a relationship, they do deserve to know.
They do deserve to know.
We're talking like the dating scene where you're just getting to know somebody. Like, that is up to you. And I think, I think it does come from a place of insecurity, because also not only to give them an out, but to not get you, for you to not get too attached like before. But that's going to be hard to do. I mean, it's hard to, I feel like it really depends on the person and on the situation too. Like, with some people, you might disclose sooner, with some you might not. It really just depends if you knew them prior, or they're different, like
there's so many
they are
circumstances.
just a really open person, maybe you feel open. Like, I had a friend who I met who was going through cancer, and we just like shared a lot immediately because we had that thing to relate on. Because like we not relate on, I'm not saying like my situation is anything near cancer, but you know what I'm saying. Like, it was just like we started talking about health stuff and we like could relate. That's a little different, but you got to read the room. It's like me and you. I mean, when we met, we were just like completely like all the way in. But you got to like read the situation.
And I think that reading the situation is also a big part of what has gotten me to think more about this in my life, in dating and in friendships, because I think it's... I think the way that I used to do it, and again, I don't blame myself. I just think that I've grown as a person, and I'm doing something, like, I'm going with something that is better for me at this stage of my life, okay? But, like, I think it is unfair the way that I disclosed before. And I think of like even a relationship that I was in where I disclosed a lot of stuff very early. And it's unfair. Like, that's so much, especially when like with all of the stuff that Case and I have going on, like in our health, like putting all of that on one person, maybe like all at once, or even like little by little, but over a shorter span of time, you give them no time to digest, and you're sharing something that is a little bit of an insecurity for you. And so you're expecting a certain reaction, and if they don't react that way, you're gonna be hurt.
Yes, and you're going to resent them for it. And they can't help their reaction in the moment. They don't know you're about to share something like that, and then you throw it on them.
Like, you catch them so off guard, and you tell them, like, so much about your life. And I think if the roles were reversed, and you were on the receiving end of some big blow, and you were like, oh, geez, like, what am I supposed to do with this information? Right.
I think that's a really mature way to look at it, because I'm often not thinking of what they're feeling. I'm thinking of what I'm feeling. Disclosing it. Like, I'm thinking of my feelings, and if they have a bad reaction, well, they're a bad person. It's like, that's not true, because they don't know it's coming, and you're saying this thing, and like, sorry if their reaction is not like the most amazing right away. I mean, like, it's not really their fault. And now, if the reaction is terrible, then they are a jerk, you know.
Sure.
But, I mean, if they just like completely are like, well, you're awful, you know, whatever.
Yeah, and they're mean to you. But like,
if they're mean, if they make you feel bad or they're mean, that's a different. But if they just have kind of a, like, if they're silent or they don't know how to take it immediately, we got to give people time to process things, just like we would have to process something. And it might be something they just don't have much understanding about. Like, they don't know much about disability or illness, like, or they might not. And so, and that's why when I said the friend, talking with other sick friends, it's like, are you disclosing something that's kind of in their realm, or do they know nothing about what you're saying? And I think, that's also a little...
Yeah.
That's like, what if they have, like, a legally blind sister? Oh, well, then it might not be as much of a blow when you say I'm legally blind. But if they've never met somebody...
There's a lot of nuance there. I think that's such a good point.
There's a lot of nuance there.
I think also, like... we were talking about this before we started recording, but, like, whatever works for you, and again, read the situation, but for the most part, we don't recommend sitting down and giving people the entire story. It's just not a great way to do this.
Right.
We recommend, I recommend kind of just, as the situation allows, share just like a snippet and keep it short and sweet. And you know what? And I was talking to my therapist about like oversharing and how to kind of combat that. If people ask questions, they want to know more. Yes. So then answer them, right? Like,
right.
Keep your answers somewhat brief. I'm also saying this for myself because, like, having ADHD, I want to give you, like, the entire, like, 5-paragraph essay version, and it's like, no, they didn't want that. But if they ask, they want to know, and that's true. Good.
And if they seem uncomfortable, they might not be willing. They might not want to know a lot more.
Yeah.
And another thing Cass and I were talking about is, like, if you're disclosing something that you're afraid you're going to be rejected about, or that you don't feel comfortable with, it's kind of like you were saying, the whole sit down thing. Don't make it if you make it a super serious thing, it's going to come off more dire than you might like want it to. Like,
right.
I was like, it doesn't have to be a big production of like, hey, I was born on this day with this, and this is, it doesn't have to be, that's just going to make it really dramatic, and it might make the news like worse to the other person. You can kind of be, I'm not saying you can't get deep with someone eventually and share deep things, but yeah, and it is nice when people ask, because a lot of times I feel like I'm always the one sharing. Like, I've been going through some health stuff this year, and I feel like with you it's different because you understand health stuff, but with my non-health friends, I just like share updates, and it's like, I don't know if this is like wanted or whatever. And when I was on my trip recently with some friends, one of them, I was like alone with just one of them, and they randomly out of nowhere was kind of just like, how's your health been? And I think that's nice, because then you don't feel like you're like always the one like dumping this information. It's like somebody asked, and you're like, oh, now like you were saying, if someone asks questions, that means they want to know. It's like they're actually curious, and they're not annoyed by you just like always like inserting your health into the conversation.
Right. You talking about your trip recently made me think about disclosing / potentially oversharing with friends. So I had like, I don't even want to say like a deja vu, but I kind of had like a cyclical moment, right? Okay, so back in like 2021, I had met some new friends, and a group of us decided to take like a weekend trip to Gatlinburg, and we like got an Airbnb cabin, and I was like, oh boy, I felt kind of under obligation to like disclose my ostomy, my lack of colon, for those that don't know. And so like I did it. It went over really well. I like, it was good. It was a good experience. However, I'd only known these friends for maybe 3 months, which is like fine. I didn't like out of the gate tell them the story of my life. But like, now I don't know that I'd even do it then. I would want to be like closer to someone to have that like private information, frankly. That's just not pertinent for everybody to know. They don't need to know how your body functions.
And it's not even that you're ashamed, because you're a very confident person. And it's not even that. It's totally a separate. I just want to make sure the listeners know that.
And I appreciate you interjecting that. I think also it's not that it's a secret. It's not. No. And like, I just think it's not for everybody to know.
It's personal.
It's personal, and I should start treating it that way. and giving it kind of its own privacy, right? Like, and that's okay. And, you know, if it comes up, or like, you know, I don't know, if it comes up in a way that I feel that it's good for the sake of the relationship, that you kind of have to consider carefully when you are sharing like more vulnerable information, then share it. Absolutely. But like, I went on a weekend trip with some different friends that I had been getting to know for about 3 or 4 months also. And we got an Airbnb cabin and we went to Red River Gorge in Kentucky. And I also had like learned to like manage my ostomy a little bit differently. I've had it for like over 9 years and I feel like I'm still learning stuff, but I found a way to manage it that it was really discreet, that no one was really gonna know, and I like kept everything separate from like the regular garbage. And so like I had my own way of dealing with it. It was kind of concealed and private, and I went through an entire weekend without needing to disclose, because I feel like if I did, it would have been out of obligation and convenience, as opposed to disclosing because I want people to know me.
Yeah, you never want to do it out of obligation. I mean, like, you know, it doesn't feel like the right time. Like, you want to do it when you feel comfortable and it's the right time. And sometimes disclosing to a group can be way harder than, like, a one-on-one convo.
But you feel like a stage show.
Yes, you feel like everyone's looking at you and you're like, this is the thing. I would way rather... If someone was asking me about HPS in front of like 5 other people, I would feel really awkward about it. But if someone asked me one-on-one, I would share a good bit, probably, because like that's just different.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't want, because it's like everyone else is listening in, and like then it's like then you're like giving a speech to everyone about
like where's my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes,
you know?
Right. I was. We kind of talked about this too recently. I was really proud of myself recently because I was like on a work call. And somebody had said that a relative of theirs was really struggling with an ovarian cyst rupture recently. Mm-hmm. And I've had that happen a lot, and it's bad. I had to go to the ER multiple times or whatever. But I just said, like, I didn't know this person very well. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't going to be like, I've had that. You know, I was just like, that sounds bad. If it were like you, I probably would be like, I've had that. You know, it just depends on the context and who you know and whatever.
Exactly.
But yeah, I was like proud of myself because younger Casey probably would have been like, I've been there. And it's like, it's not needed because I don't know this person very well. It's like a Zoom call. Like, we don't need to like just, all you have to say is like, sorry to hear that, you know?
Right. Right. And I feel like I'm worried that we might get some backlash for this hot take because I think a lot of people in that situation would react the way that you say younger Casey would, and I would have done the same thing too back some time ago. And so like it's not that it's bad.
No.
It's just that like the situation is not appropriate necessarily. Again, you can judge for yourself, but like on a Zoom call where you don't really know the person, and also in front of a bunch of other people.
Right.
My mental thought process in situations like that is like, if I were to share this information right now, how do I expect that other people would react? Mm-hmm. Because I think in the situation of that call, people would have been like, that's terrible. Awkward silence.
Yeah.
Hate that. You know, like, how do you pivot from that? Now it's weird.
Yes.
Right?
And like, and when I told that story, I wasn't even, like you said, it's not bad per se. I wasn't even necessarily giving advice of like telling people not to do that.
No. I know you weren't.
Like, so like, if you do that, I'm not saying it's like a bad thing, but I feel, okay, so like this person said, my relative is going through this thing. So clearly they're sharing that they are struggling to see their relative go through it. If you then say, I've been through that, then you're kind of like making it about you, where the person has to comfort you. Like the person's like, I'm sorry. Then they're comforting you. Yes. That's too bad.
It's no longer about their relative.
And I don't know. But like we said, it's very nuanced and context matters, because I recently had a very close friend that was diagnosed with something I have. And I did, share a lot with her, but it was more like advice of things that I've done, things that I've tried. And and I think she really was grateful to have me in that situation and like, for instance, if I ever went through like Crohn's disease or something, I would be so grateful to have you to like ask. And so I think sometimes it's not bad to say, hey, I've been there and I want to help you, like take my hand. I want to help you through this. But when you're on a Zoom call, like it's not the time.
Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of people who have been like really struggling with like bowel disease, and they like may be considering surgery, and they're like they're soliciting help, right? Yeah. Or even if I hear about something, just like sometimes if I feel enough that I'm okay to share with someone, again, it's not like deeply personal stuff. Like I've shared some of it on this pod, but like I kind of offer like, hey, I've been through that. If you do want to talk, let me know.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah.
And you're just letting them take it. But like there have been some situations, and this is how this pod topic came up, was like there have been some situations that have really hit super close to home with people talking about stuff that feels incredibly relevant to me, and younger Cass would have 1000% use that as an invitation to just like to talk about my life and for people to maybe get to know me better, which was my original like thought. But like, like it came up, it was a really wild thing. It's never happened, but it was just like, when you like talk with friends, a conversation kind of devolves into like other threads of like kind of building on the joke, right? Mm-hmm. So we were talking about how like as a joke, one of my this is how it came up also, like one of my friends who was in this conversation is a doctor, and so like he knows a lot about the human body, and he had made a joke referencing GoLytely, which if you aren't familiar, it's like the thing that you take to prep for like a colonoscopy. It really cleans you out. And so they were like, wait, he had mentioned that kind of as part of a conversation, and it got brought up. And then there were some jokes because like I've seen this online too, but like I guess you can get, it's part of like a promotion for colon cancer awareness or something. You can get a colonoscopy at Disney World, which is
insane.
Just a really crazy premise.
Yeah.
And so then like we were just making some jokes, and we were like, wow, can you imagine like the doctor performing that procedure wearing like big Mickey gloves, and like they have to be like in character while they tell you about like what's going on. And my friend who's a doctor made a joke about like, what if you found out you had to get ostomy surgery at Disney World? And I was like mentally like,
sitting there like, oh my gosh.
And like it was so specific that I was like, there was a part of me that was like, oh my gosh, I want to word vomit right now. Like, and I was just like, no, because that's not the point of this conversation. We were just making also some in, like, jokes. A big
group. It wasn't one-on-one. You were like with a lot of people, and yeah, you'd be bringing the mood. You'd be changing the mood totally from like a joke to like
completely changing the vibe.
Yeah, that's so true.
And people would be so unprepared for that like dramatic shift. Like if I would have shared in that moment, people would be like, "Oh, wow!" And then like
that's so true.
It's just not fun anymore.
That's such a good point. It wasn't even like a dramatic conversation. Like he was joking. Like, and I do, what you said about telling someone, hey, I've been through that, I'm here if you have questions or whatever. That is so much better than being like, I've been through that and it was really hard on me and I went through this and this and I'm still because then kind of like what we were saying, you're making it dramatic, like you're changing the mood. So like saying that you've had it, like saying that it's happened to you is not the problem. It's when you like go on and like, and then the person has to feel like they have to comfort you because you're like, oh, it was so hard. And
you're literally like making it a therapy session.
Right. Like we were just talking last night about different like dental procedures, and my wisdom teeth were really hard. But if someone said, oh, I'm about to have my wisdom teeth extracted, all I have to say is like, oh, I've been there. But you don't have to be like, oh, well, when I did it, it was this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what they want to hear. Like,
Yeah.
Like,
unless they ask, what was it like when you got your wisdom teeth out? And then you can share. But even then, like, consider the way that you share, right? Like, instead of like, oh man, it was really hard and whatever, like, the tone matters so much. Like, you could have been like, well, it was kind of rough for me, like, haha. But, you know, like, hopefully that doesn't happen to you. And, like, being positive about it, even if, like, when you think about it yourself, it's like, that was a terrible experience. Yeah. But, like, people don't need that in that moment.
Right. Yes. I feel like the health stuff we can hide easier, but the vision is kind of hard not to. It is. I feel like that's the one I still struggle with the most because I want them to understand. Yeah. And I feel like we just get around so normally that they
I feel can't. So defensive over it sometimes.
Yeah, me too.
Like, the amount of times, like, a date has been like, wow, it must be so expensive to rideshare everywhere. And then I'm like, actually, it's not. Like, and then I just feel like the need to defend myself. And it's like, I need you to know. And, like, some of that is actually good. Like, they should know, right? Like, there's, like, a lot of misconceptions because, again, we feel like the representative of our group. We get tokenized. We're the blind person that they've met before. Yeah. And so,
oh no, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Paused. No. I feel like that was kind of done anyway. But like,
you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, the older I've gotten, I feel like I actually almost share my vision more sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know why? Is because as a younger person, I would be friends with someone for like 5 years, and I would kind of look at the friendship and think they don't really understand this at all. Even still, they don't get it, and they never will fully get it. No. But I do feel like as an adult, I don't lie as much. If someone says, look over there, I will say, oh, I actually can't see that. Yeah. Because lying got me nowhere. Lying about what I could and couldn't see and pretending to see things I couldn't see, it really did me a disservice in making people think I saw everything. So I almost do bring up my vision more, but not in like a Oppression Olympics way of like, oh, my life is so hard. It's not like that. It's like, it's not for attention anymore. It's more just like, this is who I am. I'm confident to let you know that I can't see these things. And like, I think that like, I think if you don't talk about it at all, you might be in denial or like you might have like a confidence thing going on with it. Whereas like I'm confident enough about it to just be like, this is who I am. And I'm going to bring it up naturally in conversation because it's part of me. So then, it's complicated.
It's so complicated because like with just my vision, I do want to talk about it to an extent where like, again, I'm not just like, I don't know, sharing every like mediocre experience I've had, but also like, I don't know. I want people to know that it's okay to bring it up. I also like kind of, I don't know. Especially with not driving, like I want people to know that like, I do appreciate when you offer a ride, actually. Like, that's really nice. But I don't always say yes as, like, a way to protect myself and my autonomy. So that they know that I'm capable of getting around without their help, but I appreciate their help, right? Yeah. I think there's also, like, I used to be more aggressive about it when I was in my earlier 20s. Especially having a service dog. I think that is like a whole other can of worms.
Yes, it is.
Because people have so many questions. You don't always present as disabled. And so then like I feel like I would either share too much or I would be really snappy with people. And I would like not want to talk about it at all. And so I think I'm like, right after my first guide dog retires, I'm finally reaching a middle ground.
Good.
we're like, you know, I can kind of address it. Yeah, okay, yes, please don't interact with my dog. You know, but like, I want to share about it without making it my entire personality. I'm not just girl with service dog, guys. Like,
no.
an untouchable dog that you can't interact with. I want you to, like, and I started kind of making jokes about it where I was like, yeah, she's definitely the coolest thing about me, but also the least interesting part about my life. I myself as a person have, like, in other words, have a lot to offer. Not that I say that like in words, but like I don't need to, unless they ask a lot of questions, I don't need to whip out the PowerPoint presentation. And frankly, even if they do ask a lot of questions, I direct them to resources where they can learn more, where I don't have to be their sole source of information because I want to talk about anything else.
Yeah. Yes. And it's hard. It's just so, we could go back and forth forever. Because at the same time, it does make us unique, and we do like that about ourselves, and we don't want to hide it under a bushel.
Right. And not to like keep going on this tirade, I will say, like, I think also, as just a side tangent, I think people who have dogs as pets, and I can't speak for every service dog owner, okay? So, like, don't take this as law. This is my opinion. People with pets usually really like to be asked about their pet because they, like, it's like their fur baby, right? They love their dog.
Yes.
And that's a lot of times how people make conversation. I think people think that that's always the case for service dog handlers, and it is not always the case. There are service dog handlers that adore to talk about their service dog.
Yeah.
But for me, I don't. Not because I don't like my service dog, or I hate her, or anything, or I'm ashamed of her, but because I'm in public and I want to talk about stuff to get to know you as a person.
Yeah.
And I feel like by getting to know my dog and why I have her in this restaurant here right now, like, you're not really getting to know me. I'm just giving you a presentation that I've given every other stranger.
She's not a pet. She's a tool, and the tool directly relates to your disability, therefore making you have to talk about your disability. Like,
exactly.
If I'm talking about Rupert, I don't have to mention my vision one time.
No.
I can just say he's really cute, and he has curly hair.
He's really cute. And, like...
But I don't have to be like, oh, I use him because I'm blind. Oh, I was blind at birth. Oh, blindness.
Yes. And suddenly now it feels like oversharing.
Yeah.
It's really hard to draw that line. And I think for most people, it's really almost impossible to see a service dog as a tool, which is a really hard distinction to make.
Right.
And I've had to be forgiving for people who can't make that distinction because some people just can't. They're just like, dog, and I have to talk about it.
Right. Yeah.
But
yeah.
That aside, I think this is such an ever-evolving topic. And I think at the stage we're at, like, oversharing, meaning, like, I think the stage we're at in our lives, we've taken kind of a good look at why we share information, times that we've definitely overshared, but also, like, giving vulnerable moments, like, the gravity that they deserve.
Yeah.
And, like, I want to kind of... There was one point that I kept thinking of throughout the episode and I kept forgetting, so I'll just say it now. I like what you were saying about both, like, you don't have to make it a dramatic moment, but also, like, you don't have to, I don't know, you don't have to just, like, I don't know, make it a whole thing. I think one point that was mentioned in this book, Platonic, that we have referenced a few times, is like, if you do share something that's vulnerable at the right and proper time, where you feel safe, where you feel like this could be relationship building, you're doing it kind of consciously and not just as an impulse, if you're sad about it, be sad about it.
Yeah, right.
Give emotional moments emotion. not in like a fabricated way, but like if you share something that's hard for you to share and you kind of play it off as if it's not a big deal, people are going to act like it's not a big deal. And that might not be the reaction that you want from them in that moment. Right. You might want a lot of empathy and need empathy in like as a result of what you're sharing. But if you say it like really blasé too, they're just going to be like, oh, okay, so it's not that big of a deal then, I guess.
Right. And I know you know this, but in the context I was saying was more like very specifically.
Oh, I for sure know.
When you're dating and when it's something you are afraid of being rejected for is when I said you don't have to make it a big like ordeal when you're crying. But that's more disclosing. Yeah, but
that's disclosing. There's a difference between disclosing and being vulnerable on purpose.
Yes, absolutely. And in platonic, like she says, not only are you going to feel closer to the person after you're vulnerable, they're going to feel closer to you that you were vulnerable with them. Like,
I think when like friends have shared something that was kind of vulnerable for them, where they'll even preface it with like, I haven't really told many people this, but they'll like, and they'll share that with you. Like you feel like, oh wow, how honoring they wanted to share that with me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it is really special in the right moment at the right time.
In the right moment. I think, like, what it really boils down to, like, there's a fine line between exclusively disclosing, oversharing, and being vulnerable. Yeah. I think also it's heavily context dependent and not, like, the context of the surroundings, the level of relationship, the depth of what you're planning to share. There are a lot of factors involved, and so just like if I could offer any advice, it's just like, hey, be conscious.
Yeah. Be
of
conscious,
everything.
let people have their moment, you know, don't try to one up and take their moment. But also, this episode was not necessarily advice because some people might do it a different way. They might disagree. This is just how we go about it. And once again, Cass, I'm always shocked how often we agree about this kind of thing. Just in, like the way we approach our disability is so similar, and also we are always evolving, but we like almost evolve together. Like
you were talking about like making changes to the way that you share information in your late 20s, early 30s, and like it's now toward my late 20s. I feel like this revelation has been like this year for me.
That's like, when it was for me. Yeah.
Hey, I don't have to give people the litany of my life, and I think you truly inspired me in that way because like I love sharing things. Even if you ask me about my day, I'll give you the uncut, unabridged version. I love talking to people, and I love being present in a conversation. And so like also like just seeing the ways that you can like summarize and also give like a good snippet of information without like going too deep too quickly before you or the other person in the context of whatever is ready. And if they want to ask more, then they will. But like I don't have to artificially force that in a conversation, and I think you do that like just super well, and I've like really appreciated your example in that regard.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel like I learned from you, and like I've learned a lot from you in communication style as well, because I think you it's a weird way to put it. I was going to say you're talented in a lot of ways with communication, and you are, but it's a weird way to say talented. I don't know what other word to use, but you are a gifted communicator in many ways.
That's kind. Thanks.
No, you are. Like, you're very good about like asking about the other person and actually seeming genuinely interested when you do ask, and things like that. And so, yeah, we learn from each other. But absolutely. I feel like a lot of the way we see disability is very similar. Like,
it's so similar. And even the places where we differ slightly, where like I'm like 100% all the time using like audio description and you're like more selective about it, right? Like the places where we differ, it's not like that deep, but on kind of core fundamental, like, how we view disability as a whole, like, we're almost always in line.
Yeah, but you're right. It's more like tools that we differ, because I use more like airport assistance than you, and like things like that. Yeah. But that's so like there's so many tiers, and that's like the less important tier of, like, you know.
When you said tears, I heard like TEARS.
Oh no,
not TER.
There's so many tears throughout this journey. We just cry a lot.
We just cry a lot.
But we're so productive. It's an art. Sorry.
Oh, we can do it with a broken heart.
Yeah, we can do it hard.
So good. I love episodes like this where we kind of get to, like, also, like, the episodes like this, like, help us sort through our own thoughts on a really nebulous topic, and, like,
or it just makes us think, wow, this is such a nuanced topic, and I don't know what I'm thinking, because it goes so many directions.
It's so many, and it's so, like, most things in life, so heavily context dependent.
100%. It's like we just scratched the surface. We could even do a part 2. I feel like we scratched the surface.
100%. But we hope that this, like, if nothing else, kind of gets you thinking about the ways that you communicate with others in general. Mm-hmm. You know, even if you tend to give out more information, like, that's fine. We're not shaming anyone. We're just talking about what's worked for us and how we feel in our current stage. So, like, no shame to absolutely anyone. But we appreciate you guys.
Yes.
And
we do. We appreciate you so much. And I guess until next time, you guys, after you see us next, we'll have gone to the NOAA conference.
Yay! I can't wait to see you.
I can't wait. Oh my gosh. So, thank you all for listening. Thank you so much.
See you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.